Hi, I'm Adam, and this is Hope Reserved, where we think through Bible theology and worldview. In this episode, we're going to be looking at Isaiah chapter 13, and we're going to be looking at an oracle against Babylon, a symbolic connection between Babylon and the current kingdoms of the world, prophecies that look to the overthrow of the Babylonian kingdom and its future desolation. So I'm going to read Isaiah chapter 13. The oracle concerning Babylon, which Isaiah the son of Amos saw. Lift up a standard on a bare hill. Raise your voice to them. Wave the hand that they may enter the door of the nobles. I have commanded my consecrated ones. I have even called my mighty warriors, my proudly exalted ones, to execute my anger. A sound of tumult on the mountains, like that of many people, a sound of uproar of kingdoms, of nations gathered together. The Lord of hosts is mustering the army for battle. They are coming from a far country, from the farthest horizons, the Lord and his instruments of indignation, to destroy the whole land. Wail, for the day of the Lord is near. It will come as destruction from the Almighty. Therefore, all hands will fall limp, and every man's heart will melt. They will be terrified. Pains and anguish will take hold of them. They will writhe in pain like a woman in labor. They will look at another in astonishment, their faces aflame. Behold, the day of the Lord is coming, cruel with fury and burning anger, to make the land a desolation, and he will exterminate its sinners from it. For the stars of heaven and their constellations will not flash forth their light. The sun will be dark when it rises, and the moon will not shed its light. Thus I will punish the world for its evil, and the wicked for their iniquity. I will also put an end to the arrogance of the proud, and abase the haughtiness of the ruthless. I will make mortal man scarcer than pure gold, and mankind than the gold of Ophir. Therefore I will make the heavens tremble, and the earth will be shaken from its place, at the fury of the Lord of hosts in the day of his burning anger. And it will be that, like a hunted gazelle, or a sheep with none to gather them, they will each turn to his own people, and each one flee to his own land. Anyone who is found will be thrust through, and anyone who is captured will fall by the sword. Their little ones will be dashed to pieces before their eyes, their houses will be plundered, and their wives ravished. Behold, I am going to stir up the Medes against them, who will not value silver or take pleasure in gold. And their bows will mow down the young men, and they will not even have compassion on the fruit of the womb, nor will their eyes have pity on children. And Babylon, the beauty of kingdoms, the glory of the Chaldeans' pride, will be as God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah. It will never be inhabited or lived in from generation to generation, nor will the Arab pitch his tent there, nor will the shepherd make their flocks lie down there. But the desert creatures will lie down there, and their houses will be full of owls. Ostriches will live there, and shaggy goats will frolic there. Hyenas will howl in their fortified towers, and jackals their luxurious palaces. Her fateful time will soon come, and her days will not be prolonged. So chapters 1 through 12 reveal God's plan for Judah and Israel, while chapters 13 through 27 focus on a wider scope. Isaiah is declaring a severe warning for Babylon, and this oracle may have been directed at Babylon, or it may have simply been written to encourage Judah. Verses 1 through 4 were likely given orally, and then they were written down to add new meaning. This section in chapters 13 through 27, they have two main points. First is that foreign allies will not succeed in helping Judah. And second is that the foreign oppressors will be stopped. In chapter 13, 2 through 14:27, it's looking beyond Babylon. Babylon in the Bible is often used as a symbol for the powerful, violent, and oppressive world empires that would succeed it. The prophecy points to God's final salvation and that his people will no longer suffer at the hands of the proud and selfish world rulers. In this prophecy, God's declaring his judgment against Babylon. And it also looks at the day of the Lord, when God will judge the nations of the world. In verses 2 through 16, it points out that God's coming judgment on the Gentile nations. God is the head of his army, and he draws out the nations to come and fight. The makeup of God's army on the day of the Lord is not defined here, but they are simply called consecrated ones. And in the context of the day of the Lord, it may be referring to angels or also angels and God's people. This battle brings about great destruction over the face of the earth. As mentioned in verse 10, it will extend to the heavens. So this may simply be referring to celestial objects, so like actual stars, or it may also be a symbolic judgment of the fallen supernatural realm as well. So celestial objects in the ancient Near East were thought to be directly connected with the supernatural realm and with angels and those sorts of things. And the mention of the door of the nobles in verse 2, it's meant to be a pun that's directed at Babylon. And the name Babylon in Babylonian actually means gate of the gods, which provides further evidence that the judgment will be on both human and supernatural realms. Isaiah reveals in verse 11 why God is judging Babylon and the world powers that would follow in its footsteps. It's because of their wickedness, evil, iniquity, and pride. Verses 17 through 22 are directed at Babylon specifically, and it looks to its fall in 539 BC, the hands of the Medes and Persians. The Chaldeans mentioned in verse 19 were a group of people who became leaders within Babylonia, and King Nebuchadnezzar and King Merodach-Baladan were Chaldeans. Nebuchadnezzar had led Babylon to its peak position of power and influence in the world, but it fell one generation after his death. And then the fulfillment of the prophecies mentioned here are as follows. So the prophecies in verses 1 through 5 happened in 689 BC when Babylon was attacked by the Assyrians. And then the prophecy in verses 17 through 18 happened in 539 BC when the Medes and Persians overthrew Babylon. So it's important to remember that prophecies often have both a near-term fulfillment and a long-term fulfillment. And that's kind of how we can get both these near-term events of Assyria attacking and Babylon and the Medes and Persians overthrowing Babylon. At the same time, we're talking about the day of the Lord. And Isaiah is full of this principle where he talks about judgment on Assyria or judgment on Babylon. And he also brings in points to the future day of the Lord, and it just brings these connections between Assyria and Babylon and the world kingdoms that would be present on the day of the Lord. So what can we learn from this passage? So one of the biggest points is that any kingdom that sets itself up against God and his principles will fall. And we see this in Egypt, Babylon, Assyria, and it's true of nations today. There are two sides that we can belong under, and we can either belong under the kingdoms of the world that will be judged on the day of the Lord, or we can belong to God's kingdom. We can be with God or we can be opposed to God. And the only way that we can be with God is by being forgiven and having relationship restored by repentance and faith in what Jesus did with his first coming. So the day of the Lord is often associated with Jesus' second coming. And I think Joshua explained this principle well when he was addressing the nation of Israel after they had conquered the land and were at peace in the land of Canaan, Israel. This is Joshua 24:14 through 15. Now therefore fear the Lord and serve him in sincerity and in truth, and do away with the gods which your fathers served beyond the Euphrates River and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. But if it is disagreeable in your sight to serve the Lord, choose for yourselves today whom you will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served, which were beyond the Euphrates River, or the gods of the Amorites, in whose land you are living. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. So I hope you have enjoyed learning about Isaiah chapter 13, and I just want to thank you for listening.